We were paraded to watch an execution. The unfortunate victim was a fellow from the 124th New York. He had deserted and joined the rebel army. After serving a time in an Alabama regiment, he came into our lines as a rebel deserter. So far, all went well, and doubtless would have continued so but for the next step in his program. Having been sent to New York until paroled, he went to a bank to draw his money. Here he had to give his name, and here his play ended. The detective soon had him, and he was forwarded to his regiment to be dealt with according to law. Sentence was executed this day at noon in the presence of this division. He was thoroughly overcome and could perform the death march only as he was supported by the chaplain. It is a sad sight to see a young man brought to such a doom. We must enforce discipline, or we should soon see our army dwindling away. The late conscripts are mostly wholly mercenaries. Remove the penalty for desertion, and these fellows would skip. This man knew the penalty and incurred the risk. Now he must endure the punishment. At 11 o'clock, we were ordered out to witness an execution of an Englishman, charged with desertion with intent to betray. He had left our lines a little to the left of Fort Sedgwick. Near this point, our line projects toward Rebeldon, forming an angle. The fellow started for the rebel lines, but the night being exceedingly dark and much firing going on, he got turned round to the left and ended up in front of the angle near some old chimneys on the Jerusalem Plank Road. Supposing himself at the rebel lines, he mounted the works and yelled, "Don't shoot! I'm a Yankee deserter with important information for headquarters." He was accommodated with a speedy visit to headquarters, but the important information died on his lips when he found himself facing his own brigadier general. His crime was compounded by the fact that he was a British emissary. The day of his execution has been a raw, uncomfortable one, and every bone in me rattled as I waited the slow movements of the cortege. It might not be right to want to hurry another human being out of this world, but the longer I thought of his treachery and the lives it might have cost, the more I wished for his immediate execution. He didn't seem to share my feelings and tried to delay the business in every way. He threw the bandage from his eyes at least 20 times. He would take off his coat and walk around and then put it on and sit on his coffin. In a moment, he would hop up and throw it off again. This he did time after time till my patience was worn threadbare. The woods were only 20 paces in his rear, and the undergrowth so thick that no mounted force could have pursued him. If he were shot running away, it would be no worse than his sentence fate. I held my breath as we watched his gyrations, but he made no attempt to flee. The marshal and the chaplain finally lost patience and informed him that no more fooling would be allowed. With this, he submitted to the bandage, and in a few moments his body was riddled with bullets. It was a great relief when it was over. I was chilled all out of shape, and my teeth chattered in their sockets. I was soon back in camp, hugging the fire. Nothing of note going on this morning, only a notice that we should go out at 10 o'clock to witness an execution. Being now on the eve of important movements, it becomes necessary to make an example of someone so that we might have a wholesome dread of the fate of cowards and govern ourselves accordingly. The victim this time was a person whose intellect was in several senses below par, and this is by no means the first such instance I have noticed. The men who were selected to do the shooting made a botch of it, and hit the man everywhere except in a vital part. He rolled on the ground, writhing in agony until the reserve, 2 in number, were ordered to finish him, which they did by blowing his brains out. It was the most sickening sight I have ever witnessed. Although I have seen men fall in action and seen them mutilated in every way, that was in the regular order of warfare, not deliberate murder. This man was simply butchered by blunders, and at a time when every man is needed. If all were treated thus who have ever shown their coattails to the enemy, our ranks would be thinned to such an extent that we should have to recruit before the spring campaign could commence. There's another reason why the shooting was not justifiable. If a man is a coward and can't control himself, he should be removed from the ranks and detailed for some duty he is fitted for. A goodly number of our troops are foreigners who have been impressed into the service. They had no idea of the nature of an oath when they were enlisted, and were in many cases so intoxicated that they didn't know whether they were taking the oath of allegiance or saying the Lord's Prayer. When they came to their senses, they found themselves in some military camp without knowing how they came there. Such men have a right to desert, and we have no right to shoot them. I returned to camp disgusted and in a somewhat savage frame of mind. The rest of the day I didn't do anything to distract my attention from this subject.